You put up a slide here, English language proficiency violations.
Yes.
This is great because I think this is something that we both are watching closely and trying to understand what we're seeing and what impacts we're seeing from it.
Yeah, so there has been a lot of talk about that English language proficiency is they have a lot of people were saying, gosh, that'll take a lot of capacity out of the marketplace. But what we were able to do is one, we could go back and look at what has happened in the past and when they actually were enforcing that, because for a long period of time they weren't enforcing it. And what's interesting is it looks back then very similar to what we're seeing today. But when we then do and look at the data, the number of violations that we are seeing was from June to January was about 43,000, a little bit over 43,000 violations. But what we're most curious about is those out of service violations, because those then trucks get pulled off the road. And that was under 13,000. So if you go back and say, okay, if you need 35 or 40,000 is of equipment is 1% of freight, that's not a whole lot. But then if we then go down even a little bit further and we look at unique pieces of trucks, because meaning, hey, if we can say a VIN, what does that mean for equipment? Then we're just about 11,000 pieces of out of service pieces of equipment. So that is less than 0.5% of capacity. So it's very minor and it's within the margin of error. And when we actually do look at specifically where those violations are occurring, those out of service violations, Texas is the largest, which is not surprising. But we have also up there like Wyoming. You're like, what? You're like, there's one little spot in the corner of Wyoming there. But then it kind of just is a little bit trickled throughout the rest of the
Now,
nation.
I'm going to ask you a question. You see that map you just put up with Texas leading?
Yep.
The big state on the West Coast there.
Yes, all white. Yeah.
Does anybody believe that that's the case? See, this here brings up the
Yeah.
contention. Okay?
Yep.
You know, Dean Croak, you know Dean?
I don't, but I know the name.
Okay. Dean from DAT and I were talking. He
Yes.
said he was out in California. Okay? Was out on a trip. And the drivers were willing to run the East Coast, but they weren't willing to run Texas or Florida or border states because they knew that enforcement would be an issue
Yep.
and they weren't going to do that.
Yes.
So you got there's so many things, and I love the numbers, and I'm by no means picking on
Oh
this.
no, you're
Okay?
good. Yes.
And I'm thankful. Let me preface this by saying that I'm thankful for this information. But we know we're being told from even our shippers that their asset-based carriers that they awarded to out of California, the drivers weren't even leaving their house to go get in the truck, so they didn't have drivers. We know in Illinois there are trucking companies, Eastern Europeans, etc., that didn't have any domiciled drivers in the United States. And for them, they had to close their doors.
Yep.
But they're not showing up across the board. So I guess my argument here or contention is there are drivers that are outsmarting the system because they know where it's not being enforced.
Yep.
And there are drivers that said, I'm not going to be in those numbers because I'm not leaving the house.
Totally get
So
it.
the numbers you're having or sharing at 11,000 and some violations, I know with the information we're getting and hearing that certain states, I know Arkansas is very strong on this.
Yep.
Different states that they avoid where there is no enforcement or the enforcement is not consistent, that brings up another issue. Because you could get passed in Ohio and passed in Pennsylvania and then go to Arkansas and fail the English language proficiency test.
Yeah, and some of this too gets a little conflated because some of it is English language proficiency versus non-domicile CDLs, right?
Right.
So, and those there's a lot of interaction within that because you are dealing with sometimes a non traditionally their English is a second language for them. So we have seen some because we're talking about enforcement of the non-domicile CDL, especially if they have if their green card has expired, things like that. You know, those are some of the things that have been talked about. So it's a little bit different than the English language proficiency, but I do understand your point. Your point is well taken. They may go from place to place and then finally get hit at one location. But in general, I think with it regards to the English language proficiency testing, it really has been a fairly non-issue by and large as it relates to that. But to your broader point is, are you actually seeing people who normally would be driving just saying, I'm not getting on the road? And that then does pull capacity out. And by and large, we actually have seen some of that happening. So let me show you what we have looked at with regards to the labor pool. So some of the so what we're going to look at here for a minute is the truckload employment and the carrier environment. So on the left, what we're looking at is the general freight truckload jobs. So that blue line is what has been happening with the amount of truckload jobs that are out there for payroll. And this is data that comes with the establishment payroll data. So there is revisions to this particular data. And what we have seen is that it has the top line on the left is what is getting reported in the latest reports. The bottom line is what they came out in September, and they said, hey, we are going to rebenchmark, and that rebenchmarking will happen in February of 2026, and here's what the data is going to look like. So we actually have been seeing, so we're actually more interested in what's happening within that particular data point and going forward. And that has been seeing a lot of weakness there. So we have seen a lot of jobs exiting that particular market. And when we take that into account and we look at the most recent data that they're still publishing, that number is still going down too. So what we expect is that we're going to continue to see, once we get the revisions here in about a month or two, is that we'll see a market that has shed a significant amount of jobs. And whether that is because the driver has willingly left because of some of the stuff we've talked about, or if they have been let go, no matter what, the driver pool has shrunk dramatically. And so we basically have gotten rid of all those drivers that we saw get added during the pandemic.
That's great information. Thank you for sharing it with us.
Yeah.
Joe, any questions?
No, I'm good, John. Again,
All right.
thank you, Eric. Thank you, Eric.
Well, I'm
Yes,
just
Eric.
happy you stayed awake, Joe. I appreciate that.
Hey, they got to edit out like 5 or 6 yawns of mine, but I'm sitting in a dark room, so. But that, and I should start sleeping more, but that hasn't happened. So, it's interesting to see because there's data out there, and then there's areas where there is no data.
Yeah.
And
Correct.
and from a norms perspective, I love the fact that everybody goes back and looks at historical data. What I wanted to ask you earlier is when you talk about your 5-year data, I'm sorry, I think you have to take COVID and throw it out. Just
To the broader point.
cut and fit the puzzle back together.
Yeah.
So I think that data really messes up the numbers because you can't go back 50 years and find another pandemic.
No, you got to go back over 100 years. Yes. You're right.
So if we take the COVID era out, cut and take it out, then what are we looking at, right? So it's tough because every perspective, every seat at the table sees a different perspective.
Yep.
And no one has historical data to show us where we are now and where we went and how we got there.
Yes. No, and I mean you're absolutely right on that, because for the broader point is on the COVID environment is yes, that is really not comparable, not helpful as we talk about a traditional forecast. The thing that is playing into stuff right now is more right about inflationary pressure and job growth.
Yep.
So those are still having impacts on from COVID, the COVID environment to where we are today. And those are the ones that we need to try to understand a little bit more, because we never got rid of the inflationary pressure completely. It came back down dramatically, but it's still higher than we would like to see within a normal range. And so those are one of the things that right now has been a very heated debate for a lot of economists of should the rates be lower, federal funds rate be lower. My take is no, they shouldn't be. We actually still have too much inflation in the system. You need to curb that as best you can. But at the same time, then you're dealing with job losses that we thought we had started to see some normalization already. And those are starting to be lost. So you're like, what's the...
I don't think
what
the
does that look like?
transitions happened from going from a majority services economy to more of a manufacturing footprint in the economy. I think that might be what's causing our lag, because I think that takes longer to do.
Well, it does, but I think the thing about this too is there is this structural discussion about, are we going to move back towards a manufacturing economy and away from a service economy? And the short answer right now is no, we're not. That's there may be some stuff, but we are well suited to do high tech, to do things that provide a lot of dollar value for things. But when it comes to low tech items, low cost items, we're just not. We cannot compete globally no matter what we do. Plus, we just don't have the workforce to do it. I mean, it's
The
not.
workforce is an issue. Generations.
It's the biggest. It is the hugest issue out there. I mean, heck, we can't even get enough electricians, plumbers, and carpenters. Those are. And if you can't do that, then how are you going to do some of these other things? So there's a lot of structural things that I think many people are hopeful, or at least the administration is hopeful that they can move in that direction. But I think that that's not realistic to be able to see that happening. So that's when we have to go back and say, okay, what is that? Where is freight coming from? Because we still have to have all these different things happening. Is it going to happen domestically, or is it going to happen internationally? And I just still struggle to see how we fundamentally disconnect from the global markets. And if that happens, then I think all bets are off and we have to rethink everything.
Erik Starks, everyone. Stay in your lane. Brought to you by Triple T Transport. We're a 100% employee-owned company. Joe Lombardo, podcast contributor, class act. Joe, we love you. Erik, we appreciate you very, very much. We'd like to have you back on soon.
Great. Thanks for having me.
All right.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Erik.